Hey folks, today we're diving into a story that hits right at the core of trust and betrayal. It is about a man named Brian, a hard-working engineer who spent 15 years building what he thought was a perfect life with his wife Laura. But what happens when that perfect world is shattered by a single, anonymous phone call at 2 in the morning? And what if his response is not rage, not tears, but a chillingly calm smile and a plan that was years in the making? This story is a masterclass in patience and quiet justice. So, before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I'm doing here. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Drop your city or state and the local time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. The phone shattered the silence of my temporary office. A trailer parked on a muddy expanse of churned earth that would one day be a suburban shopping center. It was just past 2 in the morning. The only light for miles was the harsh fluorescent hum above my head, illuminating blueprints that all blurred into the same meaningless lines. My eyes were gritty with exhaustion. I had been on site for 3 days straight, pushing my crew to meet a deadline that was breathing down our necks. This was my life as a civil engineer. I built things: roads, bridges, foundations. I took chaos and gave it order. I thought I had done the same with my life. The caller ID was a blocked number, probably a wrong number, some drunk dialing random digits. I almost ignored it, but some instinct made me swipe to answer. "Hello?" My voice was a gravelly whisper. A pause. Then, a man's voice, slick with a smugness that traveled through the phone line and coiled in my gut. "Is this Brian?" "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up straighter. The man chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "You do not know me, but I know your wife. Your wife, Laura, she is in my bed right now. She is a real wild one." Then, a click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand. The silence in the trailer was now immense, deafening. My first thought was that it was a prank, some sick joke. But the man's voice had a specific kind of casual cruelty that felt real. My mind, trained to see stress points and structural weaknesses, started running calculations. Laura, my Laura, the respected kindergarten teacher, the woman who organized neighborhood charity drives, the mother of our son, Leo. It was impossible. We had been married for 15 years. I remembered the day I met her. She had a smile that could disarm armies and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. We built a life together in a quiet suburb. In a 2-story colonial, I had put a new deck on myself. Our life was a blueprint I had followed meticulously. A good job, a beautiful home, a smart and healthy son. It was stable. It was secure. It was everything a man is supposed to want. But over the last year, small fissures had begun to appear in the foundation. I had ignored them. I had patched them over with excuses. Laura had taken up a new fitness class, something intense with a charismatic trainer. She said it was for her health, to combat the stress of turning 40. She started going out with the girls from the gym more often. She would come home late, smelling of wine and unfamiliar perfume, and I would already be asleep. Her phone, which used to lie face up on the nightstand, was now always flipped over, a dark, silent rectangle guarding its secrets. I had told myself it was a phase. I told myself I needed to be a supportive husband, to give her space. I was busy. The projects were demanding. It was easier to believe the simple explanation than to start pulling at threads that might unravel everything. I had built my life on the assumption of her loyalty, just like I had built our financial security on a bedrock of trust. Years ago, when her father's small hardware business was on the verge of collapse, I took $80,000 from my own savings, a sum I had been setting aside for a down payment on a future investment property, and paid off his debts. No lawyers, no contracts. It was a gift. I did it to save her family from embarrassment, to show her that her problems were my problems. It was for us, for the family. She had cried and held me and told me I was the most honorable man she had ever known. I never once thought to get it in writing. You do not ask for receipts from your own wife. I grabbed my keys from the desk. The blueprints lay forgotten. The deadline no longer mattered. My mind was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. It was a 2-hour drive home. I made it in just over 90 minutes. The highway empty in the dead of night. I did not speed with frantic anger. I drove with a cold, methodical purpose. Each mile that passed, another memory clicked into place. The furtive texts she would send while she thought I was not looking. The credit card statement with a charge for a hotel bar across town. The time she said she was at a school conference but her phone's location service, which we shared for emergencies, briefly showed her in a residential area miles away before she must have realized and turned it off. Each one was a small crack. Alone, they were insignificant. Together, they mapped out a catastrophic failure. I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark, except for the dim glow of a single lamp in the living room. Her car was in its usual spot. I used my key, but the door was unlocked. It pushed open with a soft click. I stepped inside the home I had built, the air still and silent. I walked through the living room and into the kitchen. And there it was. On our polished oak kitchen table, where Leo did his homework and where we ate breakfast as a family, lay a single piece of clothing. It was a bra. A lacy, fire engine red bra. It was not the sensible, comfortable cotton type I had seen in our laundry hamper for 15 years. This was something else entirely. Something for a stranger. It was a flag planted on conquered territory. I did not yell. I did not smash a fist into the wall. The rage I expected to feel was absent. In its place was an unnerving calm, a strange and terrible sense of peace. The ambiguity was gone. The questions, the self-doubt, the nagging anxiety that had been a low hum in the back of my mind for months. It all vanished. I now had the one thing an engineer values above all else: certainty. I walked to the sink and poured myself a glass of water, my hand perfectly steady. I looked around the kitchen. The family photos on the refrigerator. Leo's finger paintings from when he was 5, now framed. The world's best mom mug Laura had gotten for Mother's Day. It was all a set piece, a stage for a play, and I had been the only one who did not know his lines. I sat down on the sofa, the one we had picked out together. I thought about the anonymous caller. He was not my enemy. He was just a messenger, a symptom of the disease. My fight was not with him. My fight was with the woman who was my wife. The woman who had taken the life I built and turned it into a lie. I thought about the legal documents, the house deed, the joint savings account. Her name was on everything. She had always insisted on it, in the name of partnership and equality. I had agreed without a second thought. A smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the grim, thin smile of a man who has just seen the full extent of the damage and is about to start drawing up a new set of plans. A demolition plan. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled past Laura's number, past the numbers of my friends and colleagues. I found the one I was looking for. My father. He was an early riser, a creature of habit. I knew he would be awake. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Brian, is everything all right? It is almost 4 in the morning." "Everything is fine, Dad," I said, my voice even and low. "In fact, things have never been clearer. I need to talk to you. It is time. We need to talk about the fund." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. My father was a man of few words, a retired accountant who understood numbers better than he understood people. He had helped me set it up years ago, a silent investment vehicle, a safety net built from the profits of my first solo venture before I merged with my current firm. It was a substantial sum, over $300,000, quietly growing in an account that was legally and financially invisible to my marriage. It was in an LLC under my father's name. It was my ace in the hole, a contingency plan for a disaster I never truly believed would happen. "I see," my father said, and I knew he understood everything. "I will call the advisor first thing in the morning." When the first rays of dawn crept through the windows, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was not Laura's sensible sedan. It was a loud, obnoxious sports car. I watched from the window as she got out of the passenger side. A man was driving, his arm covered in tattoos, the same kind of flashy, empty confidence radiating from him as the car he drove. He leaned over and gave her a long kiss. She laughed, a sound that now grated on my ears. She ran a hand through her hair and practically skipped to the front door, fumbling for her keys before remembering it was unlocked. She walked in, humming a little tune, and stopped dead when she saw me sitting on the sofa. "Brian," she said, her hand flying to her chest in mock surprise. "You are home early. I did not expect you." "The project finished ahead of schedule," I said flatly. My eyes flickered towards the kitchen table. She followed my gaze, and for a split second, I saw panic flash in her eyes as she saw the red bra. She quickly composed herself, her face hardening into a mask of indignation. Sarah and I went out for a few drinks after the gym. I must have left that here when I changed. Things got a little wild." She tried for a laugh. It came out as a strangled cough. Sarah was her mousy, divorced friend, who I knew for a fact was visiting her sister in Florida this week. The lie was clumsy, insulting. I just nodded slowly. I did not challenge her. I did not ask who owned the sports car. "Okay," I said. "Do you want some coffee?" I was just about to make a pot. Her jaw went slack. This was not the reaction she had prepared for. She was expecting a storm, a hurricane of accusations and anger. She was ready for a fight. She was not ready for this. She was not ready for the calm. The quiet, unnerving calm of a man who was no longer her husband, but a stranger planning her eviction. "Coffee?" she stammered. Yes, sure. Coffee sounds good." As I stood up and walked to the kitchen, I could feel her eyes on my back, filled with confusion and a dawning sense of fear. The game had begun, and she had no idea what the rules were. The pot of coffee I made that morning sat on the warmer, untouched. Laura drank 1 cup, her movements stiff and uncertain, before murmuring an excuse about needing to shower and get ready for school. She fled upstairs. I was left alone in the silence of the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the stale scent of betrayal. The war had not begun with a bang, but with the quiet, awkward offer of a morning beverage. It was a domestic battlefield, and I was determined to be the one left standing. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I employed a strategy I later learned was called the gray rock method. I became as uninteresting and unresponsive as a plain gray rock. I was physically present but emotionally absent. I was polite. I was civil. But I was no longer there. When Laura would come home and ask how my day was, I would reply, "It was fine, productive, and nothing more." When she tried to start an argument about me leaving my work boots by the door, I would simply say, "You are right. I will move them," and do it immediately, giving her no emotional fuel to feed on. I handled my share of the chores. I made sure the bills were paid from the joint account. I even fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom. I was the perfect roommate, and it drove her insane. She was used to my engagement, my investment. She was used to a husband who would react, who would get angry, sad, or frustrated. A man who would fight for her. She had a script in her head for how this was supposed to play out. My discovery, my rage, my pleas for her to stay, her tearful but firm decision to leave, and my eventual heartbroken acceptance. My refusal to play my part left her without a stage. Her attempts to provoke me grew more desperate. She would talk loudly on the phone with her friends, dropping hints about her exciting new life. She would leave magazines open to articles about finding happiness after divorce. One evening, she wore the red bra again under a semi-sheer blouse at the dinner table. I complimented Leo on his good grade in science and asked him if he needed help with his math homework. I did not even glance at her. I could see the frustration building in her like steam in a faulty boiler. My indifference was a weapon more powerful than any angry word. While I maintained this placid exterior, my real work was being done in secret. The day after the confrontation, I took a half-day off work. I drove to a city an hour away to meet with a man named Arthur Vance. He was the private investigator my father's lawyer had recommended. His office was in a nondescript building, his name not even on the lobby directory. He was a former cop in his late 50s, with tired eyes that missed nothing. "So," he said, after I had laid out the basic facts, "you want proof. You want the classic hotel photos, the hand-holding in the park." "Yes," I said. "But let me be clear, Arthur. This is not for my peace of mind. I am already certain about the affair. This is for a judge. I need evidence that is ironclad and legally unimpeachable. My primary objective is to secure full custody of my 12-year-old son. I need you to establish a pattern of behavior. I need dates, times, locations. I need to show that her lifestyle is not in the best interest of a child." Arthur nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You are not the usual spurned husband. Most of them just want dirt to throw. You are building a case. I can work with that." My next meeting was with the lawyer himself, a man named Stephen Klein. He had a corner office with a view of the city and a reputation for being a shark in the courtroom. When I told him the whole story, from the $80,000 gift to the secret investment fund, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. "Remarkable," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Most of my work involves trying to find assets the other side has hidden. This is the first time a client has walked in with a $300,000 tactical advantage. The loan is the real masterstroke, though. Do you have documentation?" "Bank transfer records from my personal account to her father's business account. Emails between Laura and me where we discuss it. She calls it a lifeline I threw them," I replied. Stephen's smile widened. "Oh, this is good. This is very good," We will frame it as an intra-family loan. With a reasonable rate of interest compounded over 5 years, her share of the marital assets will be almost entirely offset by her debt to you. She will think she is coming for half a kingdom, and will find out she owes you for the castle walls. We spent 2 hours mapping out the strategy, the timing, the disclosures, the exact moment to reveal each piece of our arsenal. I left his office feeling not happy, but validated. I was not just a victim. I was a strategist. Meanwhile, back at home, Laura's behavior grew more erratic. My calm was like a mirror, forcing her to see her own reflection, and she did not like it. She started staying out later, sometimes not coming home at all. It was a relief. The less I had to see her, the easier it was to maintain the facade. I spent my evenings with Leo, helping him build a complex Lego model of the Millennium Falcon, taking him to his baseball games, creating a small island of normalcy for him in the middle of a silent hurricane. He knew something was wrong between his mother and me, but he did not ask questions. He just seemed grateful for my focused attention. A week later, I received the first envelope from Arthur Vance. Inside was a flash drive. I waited until Leo was asleep and Laura was out before I plugged it into my laptop. There they were. Photos of Laura and her trainer, a man whose name I learned was Chad. They were walking out of a budget hotel on the edge of town, Chad's arm slung possessively around her shoulder. There were pictures of them kissing in his ridiculous sports car in a public park. Seeing the visual proof sent a jolt of raw pain through me, a ghost of the man I used to be. But it faded quickly, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I copied the files to a secure hard drive, labeled it Exhibit A, and put it away. Folks, what Brian is doing here takes an incredible amount of self-control. He is living with the source of his pain every single day, but he is treating the situation with the cold, calculated precision of an engineering problem. He is not letting emotion cloud his judgment. How many of us could do that? How many of us would have the discipline to play the long game instead of exploding in the moment? Let me know what you think in the comments. It is a fascinating question of human nature. The final piece of my financial plan fell into place a few days later. My father called. The fund was liquidated. The money, a little over $342,000 after its final growth spurt, was now sitting in a new trust account in my name only, shielded from any divorce proceedings. The ace was no longer in the hole. It was in my hand. Laura must have sensed that she was losing, even if she did not know what the game was. Her frustration finally boiled over into action. She must have spoken to a lawyer of her own, one who looked at their on-paper assets, the house in both their names, the joint savings, my steady income, and told her she was in a fantastic position. She thought my silence was weakness. She mistook my patience for paralysis. It happened on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I was in the backyard, throwing a baseball with Leo. For a moment, things felt almost normal. The sun was warm on my face, and the sound of my son's laughter was real. I saw Laura's car pull into the driveway. She did not get out. A moment later, an unfamiliar sedan pulled in behind her. A bland-looking man in a cheap suit got out and walked up the driveway, holding a large manila envelope. Leo stopped, the baseball glove frozen midway to his face. "Who is that, Dad?" "I am not sure, son," I said, my heart rate picking up slightly. I knew exactly who he was. The man, a process server, walked towards me with an apologetic look on his face. "Brian Miller?" he asked. "That is me." He handed me the envelope. You have been served. I took it from him. His job done, he turned and walked quickly back to his car. I looked at the envelope, then I looked over at Laura. She was still sitting in her car, watching me, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. It was the look of someone who believes they have just delivered the killing blow. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she was about to strip me of my home, my savings, and my son. I held her gaze. I did not show the flash of anger or fear she was expecting. I simply looked at her, then at the divorce papers in my hand, and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was a nod of acknowledgement, a nod that said, "Thank you. I have been waiting for this." She frowned, her smirk faltering. That was not the reaction she wanted. She gunned the engine and sped away down the street. I stood there in the sunlight, holding the declaration of war in my hand. The first move was hers. And it was exactly what I had been counting on. The trap was set. All I had to do now was let her walk into it. I stood in the sun-drenched yard, holding the envelope that felt heavier than a bag of concrete. Leo looked at me, his young face clouded with confusion. "Dad, what is that? Are you in trouble?" I knelt down to his level, putting the papers aside. "No, son. I am not in trouble. Not anymore." I looked him in the eye, deciding in that moment that the lies and the facade were over. He deserved some measure of the truth. "Leo, you know that Mom and I have been distant lately. These papers mean that we have decided it is best if we do not live together anymore." His face fell. "Are you getting a divorce?" The word sounded ugly coming from his mouth. "Yes," I said softly, "we are. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. This is not your fault. It has nothing to do with you. You are the best thing that ever happened to either of us. And no matter what happens, I am your dad. I will always be your dad, and I will always be here for you. Nothing will ever change that. Do you understand?" He nodded, a tear tracing a path through the dirt on his cheek. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight. I felt a surge of protective instinct so fierce it almost took my breath away. This was why I was doing this. Not for revenge, for him. That evening, after Leo was in bed, I called Stephen Klein. "Stephen, it is Brian. She took the bait. I have been served." I could almost hear the smile in his voice. "Excellent. The clock starts now. Scan and email me the documents. We will file our response tomorrow morning. Let her think she is in control for a little while longer. The higher she is, the harder she will fall." The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal preparation. I provided Stephen with every document he asked for. Bank statements, tax returns, the files from the private investigator, and the detailed records of the $80,000 loan. On the home front, Laura was insufferable. Now that the papers were served, she acted as if she had already won. She treated me with a condescending pity, as if I were a poor, foolish man she was about to fleece. She talked openly on the phone with her lover, Chad, about their future plans, about the vacations they would take once she had her settlement. She was measuring the drapes on a future that was never going to happen. I simply ignored her and focused on the plan. The day of the mediation arrived. It was held in a sterile conference room in a downtown office building. The air was thick with tension. I wore a simple suit, my face calm and unreadable. Stephen sat beside me, his briefcase full of our carefully prepared ammunition. Laura arrived a few minutes late, a deliberate power move. She was dressed in an expensive new outfit, her hair and makeup perfect. She looked confident, radiant even. Her lawyer was a man with slicked-back hair and a flashy watch, who looked more like a car salesman than a legal professional. They sat opposite us. Laura refused to make eye contact with me, instead directing a triumphant little smile towards her lawyer. Her lawyer began, his voice oozing false sympathy. As you know, my client, Laura, is heartbroken that it has come to this. After 15 years of marriage, she simply wants what is fair. She has been a devoted wife and mother. Therefore, we are petitioning for... He proceeded to lay out her demands. She wanted the house, free and clear. She wanted half of all savings and investment accounts. She wanted substantial spousal support, or alimony, citing my high income and her more modest teacher's salary. And the final blow, she wanted sole physical custody of Leo, with me being granted visitation every other weekend. She was not just trying to leave me, she was trying to erase me. When he finished, the room was silent. I could feel Laura's smug gaze on me, waiting for me to break, to protest, to beg. I did nothing. I just looked at Stephen. Stephen let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer before he opened his first folder. "Thank you for that presentation," he said, his tone perfectly level. "My client, Brian, also believes in a fair and equitable division of assets. So let us start there." He slid a financial statement across the polished table. "Here is a full disclosure of the current marital assets. As you can see, the joint savings and checking accounts total approximately $62,000. We agree to a 50-50 split. A check for $31,000 will be cut to your client upon the signing of this agreement." Laura's lawyer frowned, picking up the paper. Laura leaned over, her brow furrowed. "Wait," she said, her voice sharp. "That is not right. Where is the rest of it? Where is Brian's portfolio? The investment account?" Stephen looked at her, his expression placid. "Ms. Miller, the only significant investment my client held was tied to a private LLC he established prior to your marriage. He liquidated that asset before you filed for divorce. As it constitutes premarital property, it is not subject to division." "You cannot do that," Laura shrieked, her mask of composure cracking. "That is our money." "Legally," Stephen countered calmly, "it is not." Her lawyer tried to interject, sputtering about hidden assets and legal challenges, but Stephen simply raised a hand and opened a second folder. "Now," he continued, as if there had been no interruption, "let us discuss liabilities, specifically a significant personal loan my client extended to Ms. Miller 5 years ago to resolve a family business debt." He slid a new set of documents across the table. The bank transfer showing $80,000 moving from my account to her father's. The email exchanges where she thanked me profusely for the loan and the lifeline. "My client provided these funds in good faith," Stephen said. "A loan of this nature, compounded at a modest and legally defensible interest rate of 5% over 62 months, brings the total outstanding debt to approximately $109,000. He let that number sink in. "So, when we subtract Ms. Miller's share of the marital assets, which is $31,000, from the debt she owes my client, we are left with a remaining balance of $78,000. My client is prepared to offer a generous payment plan." The color drained from Laura's face. She looked at her lawyer, who was staring at the documents, his jaw slack. The car salesman had no answer for this. He had been completely outmaneuvered. From seeking a massive payout, Laura was now facing a crippling debt. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. I will not agree to this. I will take him to court. I will take our son. This was the moment we had been waiting for. Stephen's face hardened. He reached for his final folder, the one from Arthur Vance, the private investigator. He did not open it. He simply placed it squarely in the middle of the table. It landed with a soft, definitive thud. My client wishes to avoid any further unpleasantness, Stephen said, his voice dropping to a low, icy tone. For Leo's sake. However, if the matter of custody is contested, we are fully prepared to introduce this file into evidence. It contains a detailed record of Ms. Miller's activities over the last several months. It establishes a pattern of behavior, including infidelity with a professional colleague, that we believe the court would find highly relevant when determining the best interests of a child. And I am certain the local school board would also be very interested in its contents. Checkmate. Laura stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. The last vestiges of her arrogance crumbled into dust. She knew what was in it. All her lies, all her secrets, packaged and ready to destroy what was left of her life. She looked at me then for the first time, and in her eyes I saw not hatred, but fear. Pure, unadulterated fear. Her lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps, he said weakly, we could take a moment to discuss this privately. They left the room. We could hear her muffled sobs and angry shouts through the door. 10 minutes later, they returned. Her face was blotchy, her expensive makeup ruined. She sat down and refused to look at anyone. Her lawyer spoke. My client is prepared to accept your offer. Stephen calmly laid out the final terms. I would get full physical and legal custody of Leo. In exchange for her signing away her parental rights, I would forgive her $78,000 debt and waive all future child support claims. She would walk away with nothing but the clothes on her back and the car she drove. She signed the papers with a shaking hand. The war was over. I had won. But I felt no joy. Only a profound and weary sense of relief. In the months that followed, Laura's life unraveled completely. Her lover, Chad, vanished the moment he learned there would be no payday. As these things do in small towns, the story of her affair eventually leaked out, and she was quietly forced to resign from her teaching position. Last I heard, she had moved in with her parents in another state. I sold the house, the stage of our broken marriage. I used the money from my protected fund to start my own engineering consulting firm. I bought a smaller house in a town an hour away, putting us closer to my parents. It was a new beginning, a foundation built not on lies, but on solid ground. It is a year later now. My business is thriving. Leo is thriving. He is on the honor roll and is the star pitcher on his baseball team. Sometimes I watch him playing in the yard of our new home, and I feel a sense of peace that I thought I had lost forever. The anger is gone. The pain has faded to a dull scar. I did not set out to destroy my ex-wife. I set out to protect my son and secure our future. The revenge was not in her downfall, but in our survival. I learned that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. And I learned that sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one you should be watching out for, because he is the one with a plan. And that, folks, is Brian's story. A testament to patience, strategy, and the incredible strength it takes to turn profound betrayal into a new beginning. Thank you so much for joining me today. Your support means the world to this channel. If you found this story as compelling as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe if you have not already, and ring that bell so you do not miss the next one. I would love to hear your final thoughts on Brian's actions in the comments below. Goodbye for now, and I hope to see you all again in the next story.